The stories about food that keep us stuck. Mandy and I are going to dive into all of the many stories we hear from clients, what our personal experience is around when we are so tired and cannot be bothered, what do we eat? And I think that next thought process that comes in and how that pattern is being reinforced or adjusted or broken over time to keep us healthy or keep us overweight, keep us unhealthy, right? So getting to a point of we can all have a good nutrition plan when we've got all the time in the world, we're well structured, work's going well, kids aren't sick, they're at school for the day, all of these things are going well. But as soon as one of those things gets out of line, the kid has to come home sick at 10 a.m. and it disrupts your whole day, or you've got a work project that's flat out and you end up working 12-hour, 14-hour days, or you're on holiday, or just whatever comes through, right? There's always a way that your life will be disrupted. It's never going to be perfect. And if it is that structured, then, well, you probably got there's another problem there anyway, right? Add some variety, live a little. So the big part here is I'd love to break down kind of our personal stories of what works for us, what really serves us well. And then I want to talk through some common examples that we break down for a lot of our clients to see where they're self-sabotaging, where they're just not aware that things are could be better, and just some easy kind of examples or strategies from there as well. So, Mandy, let's start with yours. You're in a spot where you're running around after two kids. You're working you don't work at home, so whereas I do. There's that little bit extra reshuffle. There's, like all times, there's either nothing in the fridge or you've got to pick something up on the way, or you don't have anything on hand, so you've got to find a better option. There's a lot in that, but I'd love to know if that's always been the case where it's just easy, regardless of the situation, to find the healthy options, or if that's changed over time for you.
I think I've always, because health has always been something that's been important to me, I've always had this lens. And I was just thinking through that question before. There's two scenarios. One will be that always lived out of town, so quick, easy options were not quick and easy. To drive 20 minutes to get takeaways was completely pointless.
Yeah.
And then at the times when I have lived in town, I've had no money, so that wasn't an option anyway. So I've been very safeguarded from all of these habits, which I think can become super easy habits for people of just, taking that kind of seemingly quick, easy route. But I have always had this leaning towards, I guess, understanding food and having a chefing background and knowing how to do stuff quickly, that the goal is always to get fed regardless of what it looks like, and make sure that that happens. Like when I get hungry, I'm hungry and I want food now. So make sure there is food there to have. And I think that has served me well, but it also has created in me a little bit of a sense of when people, tell me stories about why they can't do stuff, I'm like, I'm filtering it through the filter of my experience. I'm like, yeah, you sure? Are you sure that's really the reason why? Because I think that there's other ways to do this as well.
Yep. Okay, cool. So the chef one in itself is kind of its first example, right? Because I've met so many chefs. Like, I'd say the large majority of chefs that I've talked to are like, oh, well, I'm busy cooking all day, so when I go home, I just have like beans on toast. So
Yeah.
let's start there, because there's kind of a fatigue factor sometimes of how often someone will do something for someone else all day long and then not do it for themselves, right? The example is they'll work 10 hours on a screen for someone else, but they won't log in and watch one video for themselves. Or they'll run around picking up kids, going to work, doing all the things, but going to the gym, or, I don't have time for that, right? We can look at all sorts of examples there of just, it's a self-respect thing that's being missing of like, I just don't allocate time for myself. And potentially that's the whole thing. But I assume you've seen a lot of that with chefs being like, I just can't be bothered cooking because that's all I've done today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes down to understanding what it is you're trying to achieve with your healthy cooking. Like, obviously you want to feel good, you're probably concerned about like body composition, all those sorts of things. How do you achieve that if you are a chef, if you are in a kitchen and actually exposed to all sorts of delicious food all the time? Like, there's that whole scenario there too. But from my experience, it was just always not an option. I was still going to cook because it still has to happen. Like, we all have to do that, right? So
Mm.
I think the solution to that is don't be so complicated with it. You cook cool
Yep.
stuff at work, awesome, have your fun and do that then. And then when you get home, keep it simple. But just because it's simple doesn't mean it needs to be full of carbs and
Mm.
no protein. Like, if you can still keep it simple and aligned with your goals and not take, hours out of your day.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like you and I are really aligned with kind of what that looks like now. It's been obvious when we've gone to Melbourne and when we've gone to Bali together, and just when we've gone through out of routine, meals and things, right? We're very similar. Um, But I think I came from a different background, somewhat. Like, obviously still came up super rural. But when I went to town, whether it was the weekly shop or when I was at boarding school or whatever it might have been, the lollies or the takeout was always that treat thing, right? And I remember the first year, or at least the first 3 months of the first year of boarding school, because it was my own money, a little of it, going down to the corner store and buying some lollies and gorging myself to the point that I was feeling just horrible, and then doing it again next week, and just like having to take quite a long time before I'm like, oh, okay, I'm allowed to do this. I actually don't want to do this. Was kind of, I still remember that very vividly in my head. I'd get through like 500 grams of lollies and just get to the point of like, I don't even know where my blood sugar would be at that point, but just felt horrendous, you know?
There's a name for that. It's called transient diabetes. Actually a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to know. So, I did really have to go through a phase of having to ingrain that adjustment of when I go to the supermarket, it's no longer the weekly shop where I can pick up all the treats because quite literally when I was PTing and I was in my early 20s, I was actually in an apartment attached to the supermarket. Like I literally didn't have to go outside. It was a parking building. It was amazing for putting on weight and trying to put on muscle, but very easy to just get into that routine of like, well, I don't even need to go outside and I can get this convenient food, right? So
Mhm.
luckily I was in the health space myself, so I was aware of some of these habits starting to get, or which ones were unhelpful. Um, but it was a really big shift for me in that sort of early to mid 20s and be like, right, like there's a whole like, yes, I'm allowed this food, but two, I actually don't want it. So that whole self agency decision and actually finally listening to these cues
Mhm.
of like what my body felt good on did actually take me a decade, right? Because I was like, I want sugar. I feel horrible on sugar. Should I keep having that sugar? Yes. Oh, no, that was a bad idea, right? And I think, whether that's being alcohol, whether that's being sugar for you, we are so good at remembering the good aspects of that sugar and then forgetting how horrible we felt afterwards, right? So we continue to repeat it for far longer than we want to.
Yeah.
But at least, nevertheless, I have got to that point
You learned
where
eventually.
I want to have the meal based on how I feel afterwards, right? So I guess I bring all that up to say I've got some. I don't want to know if it's. I don't think it's empathy, but that space of like I've been there in regards to I'll just get the quick option. This is exciting because it's been a really big week, so I've got that urge to go out and get the takeaways on the Friday because I want to treat myself. I want to change up the week, right?
Mm, mm.
Now, for where I'm at right now, the observation is you and I both know is if you want to keep your body shape in a favorable space, the one or two takeaways in itself doesn't ruin the week, but it does make it harder in regards to you need to be just that much more dialed in if you're having all the extra oils and all the extra crap that makes you feel a bit, sluggish for a few days, right?
Mhm.
And I am certainly one of these guys that very much like the sugar. I really enjoy, and I still enjoy, I have to catch myself on this, having a really big meal, right? Just getting to the point and be like, oh, I'm really full. Like that was great, right? Like put me in front of a all you can eat and I'm a weapon. So I have to watch myself on that stuff because it is something that's been ingrained and been there for a really long time, right? Dare I say it, since childhood, right? But being able to look at this whole stories with food has been something that at least is a journey that I've gone through fairly regularly with clients and being able to at least be like, I know where you are in this process of if you're dieting, right? Am I allowed this food, good or bad? My response to that now is always, you're an adult. You can eat whatever you like. But if you want to get the results, I would suggest we look at this, right?
Mhm.
So, looking at any sort of stories around food, the first one I want to address is the you get to choose, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds obvious to say out loud, but like actually catching yourself in the moment. Are you getting to Friday being tired and hungry and just going, well, I'll have this because I can get away with it, right? And I've got this
Mhm.
excuse. Or like we see all the time, right? I'm in the airport lounge or I'm in this different country. So there was no better option. I'm like, there absolutely was, because we've got hundreds of clients that have shown me exactly what that looks like as a pilot in as an engineer doing night shifts, whether it's a nurse, all of these examples where they have so limited resources of time or whatever, and they're still able to find a way to eat high protein, really nail that food intake
Mm.
is not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And what that looks like in a food example is the story, I guess, in many ways we attach to you're absolutely allowed it, but what do you feel good on and what keeps you on track long term?
Yeah, yeah. I think it comes down to what are we looking for? Are we looking for all the reasons why this change won't work? Are we looking for all the reasons why we can do it? And it's really easy when you're first making a change to get stuck looking at all the obstacles along the way of I've got
Yep.
this trip coming up and there's this social event and then my family's coming over here and this is something that we always do. You see all of those situations where it might be a little bit more challenging, but they're also things that you get to choose. Like you say, you are an adult. You can approach that situation however you want. And we see this, I guess this is a flip side, right? Is we hear a lot of these stories of, well, I was just too rushed, or I need something that's portable and on the go, or I travel a lot, or these sorts of things. But then we also see so many examples of our clients that are finding ways around that. And the only difference is actually just the mindset that they approach that question with.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if we, my other thought to that is that the way to achieve that particular end won't always look the way you think it will. Like, I think sometimes we think, well, if I'm going to eat healthy for lunch, it's going to be this perfect, warmed up meal of, protein and cooked vegetables, and it's going to look all nice and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be exactly what I want to eat in that moment. When actually what you need right now in the middle of your busy workday lunch is some protein and some vegetables so you can get on with your day and feel
Yeah.
your best. It doesn't need to be all of these kind of things that we've associated with it needing to be. Those are just things that complicate it. They're nice to haves, they're not need to haves. What do you actually need in this moment? Make sure you can tick that off, and then you can bring in the nice parts or the bits that you want to have along the way. So I think it is very much, it comes down to our mindset of how we approach the question of
Well,
how.
that just, yeah, let's double tap on the whole need versus want, right? Because for most people, the need is flavor and the want is function, being the protein target. Well, that needs to be switched. Like, the need is protein, and if it tastes good, the bonus.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
think being able to see how many people get themselves stuck around well, I've had the same meal for 3 days in a row. It's a bit boring. I need to go have Indian. I'm like, well, you've had toast for breakfast for 15 years. You're still having toast. There's not been a lot of variation on that, other than maybe the jam or the Marmite or whatever you put on top. Which,
Mhm.
by the way, is kind of how I approach the chicken breast and salad. Is I'll just put a different sauce on it, right? It's kind of like your sauce and, I mean, your jam on toast. So being able to adjust those things can be super helpful to uh, really know what the vital part of that is. And the phrase I wrote down that you've said a couple of times is, not every meal needs to be a Michelin experience, right? And I think sometimes, and I can definitely say this is true, that there's always a continuum from, boring and simple to more varied. And for the most part, people that are on the boring and simple are in better shape than the people that need to have these Michelin experiences every meal, right? Now, you and I, well, probably more so you, but we're both in a spot that we want your food to taste amazing. By no means, don't get us wrong to say like every meal needs to be chicken and rice, it needs to be dry and horrible. Like, that's
Yeah, yeah,
not a
yeah,
good idea.
yeah,
But it'll get you in much better shape than having to have this big pasta carbonara from down the road every meal.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think it's not one or the other, but it's trying to make sure that the staples of like what I need here is the function, what protein amounts, what fats, etc. am I hitting, and
Mhm.
then what can I do within the realms I have to make it taste interesting and exciting, and make sure I can have it on a regular basis. Now, I have also been that person, Mandy, as you know, from like the bodybuilding preps and certain dieting backgrounds where I've wanted to get very, very lean, where I've eaten white fish microwave out of a container twice a day, and then chicken and beans for the other two meals, and done that for 12 weeks in a row.
Mm.
Um, and to the point that I couldn't touch eggs again for 6 months, and I couldn't look at white fish very regularly. I don't think I've ordered that out for a while. So one, ironically, it did actually get me in shape, but did it improve my relationship with food? No, right? Like, it was very much going too far on the end of like purely function. Don't worry about how it tastes. And that will get to a point that really shoots you in the bum, because again, we don't want to just get in shape. We want to stay in shape. And that is one of those scenarios where I was very much dialing in for a show, and then I put that weight back on. So provided you don't want to yo-yo, there is that whole relationship too.
I have a thought on that actually, because I think to give a bit of a story here, my experience with food in a way is that my dad's saying was, there's a quick and the dead. There was a lot of us. If you didn't eat fast, you missed out. And that takes quite a little bit of retraining, because it was a
Yeah.
case of eat fast and eat a lot so that you didn't
Yep.
miss out on stuff.
Yep.
But the other part of it is that we always punctuated social occasions or special occasions with quote unquote treat food. So it kind of it builds this mentality that if you're going to say Friday night, you've got to have something nice. It's Saturday night, got to have something nice. We're going out here, so we've got to have something nice. And that then becomes a part of you. And I actually found it really, really helpful recently doing like the fat loss season that I did, and actually just eating boring meals of just some chicken and vegetables and those sorts of stuff on repeat for a long enough time frame. In fact, I took Jolly it was oven baked chicken breast to the top of a mountain and ate that because that's all I could eat. Um, But the point there is that it actually helped me in some ways, I feel like it's been a good learning experience to readjust that. You don't actually need to be seeking all that sensory comfort and sensory experience from food. Find it in other areas and let food be functional. And it doesn't mean that you never enjoy your food, but it's rebalancing that spectrum, right? Because I think like the bodybuilding scenario can go so far to the functional side, there is no joy in it.
Yes.
But we're going too far to that sensory experience side as well, then we're never going to hit the goals that we want. And like all things, the magic's in the middle, and being able to kind of filter through both sides of that. And I
Mm.
think that's a really important thing too. And I think when it comes to people, and I think this shows up for lunch the most. Most people are pretty happy to eat the boring breakfast, right? Whatever it is for them. For too many people, it's toast or wheat bix, right? Move to eggs.
Well,
Or if,
overnight oats, I'm really seeing that coming through at the moment.
yeah,
Overnight
that's
oats
really
is
one of my
really big,
favorites.
and it's always the people that have really high blood sugar. I'm like, that is no longer a champion's breakfast for you. Please change it. There's sugar.
But people generally are pretty happy to eat the same breakfast. But when it
Yep.
comes to lunch, they're really looking for that variety. And I think it's probably because it's in the middle of the day. It's when you're probably the most stressed and the most busy, and you're looking for this comfort from food. That is not what food is there to serve you for. Food is there to fuel you doing the thing that you're doing. And
Mm.
this is where we've joked about this before, but boring food, sexy bodies or whatever. Keep your lunch basic. It doesn't have to be that interesting. And I'll eat like now would eat the same thing for lunch, and I know you do too. Multiple, like just all the time, right? It serves purpose. And it's not
Yep.
that it's disgusting. We might change up the sauce or the herbs or whatever. Um, but it doesn't need to be this fancy culinary experience either.
Yeah. So I want to bring something up that I hope doesn't become a reason that it's worse in winter, because that would counteract our discussion last week or whenever it was. Um, But I've found that, as you said, like if you can create that stimulus or that ability to kind of get those other senses outside of food, then the food doesn't need to be as exciting, right?
Mm,
Now, that could be as simple, and I know you've done plenty of these photos where you're on your deck in the sun, having a meal, and just kind of getting that extra, sunlight, that little bit of extra fresh air, etc. Right? And
mm.
to the human body, that's absolutely gold to just, oh, I've broken the day up a little bit, right? So it's micro holidays that we've talked about so much before. Of don't hold your breath and wait until the Fiji thing. Like actually just take a little break on the Wednesday morning to just breathe for 10 minutes before you run with your day, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason I say hopefully there's not an excuse in here, which is if you've got 3 or 4 days of horrendous weather and it's grey outside, I have to check myself a little bit more on that because I definitely notice that little bit more need for stimulus because
Yeah.
there's not as much sunlight or everything else, right? And as I've said plenty of times before, humans are just solar panels with emotions, right?
Yeah.
So being able to check yourself on those days where it is a bit doomy and gloomy, managing how you can create that space. And that might be as simple as still going for the walk. Again, the rain is not poisonous,
Mm.
but finding a way to breathe, move, meditate, whatever, stretch, whatever it might be to kind of get that, like, oh, I actually feel really good. I now no longer have to have that desire of sugar to get a dopamine hit from my meal. And
Yes.
I think that goes, for me personally, a really long way.
Yeah, I think again it comes back to that being committed to the goal, committed to the outcome rather than committed to the approach. If the purpose of breaking up your day with a walk or whatever is to get some fresh air and get some headspace, it doesn't matter if it's sunny or not. You'll get a sensory experience from the freezing cold wind or the the rain that's going down your neck as well. It's just not
Yep.
what you thought it would be.
Yep. Yep. So the next part I want to look at here, and this kind of leans in. The first part was not every meal needs to be the Michelin experience. What we're looking at there is how can you just anchor in the function aspect that needs to be hit and actually increase. To be honest, the personal standard or this personal self-respect aspect of like my body needs this, right? Like
Yeah.
treat your body like the Ferrari that needs the net 98 fuel, not the thing that you throw the vegetable oil in and hope it still works, right? Like just get things working. And I've done the supercar days, as you know, Mandy, and the amount of times that they'll put the perfect oil in and they'll put the perfect fuel in their car and then go down the road and get McDonald's. I'm like, this is so wrong, right? Like there's one is getting fuel beautifully and the other one just gets the scraps.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's tangent. So the second part here is more around how do we create a little bit more understanding of the seasons required to really get in shape, right? We've talked
Mm.
about this a little bit, but this discussion that I want to break down is that fat loss needs to be a marathon, right? Like we are absolutely the people that want to help you shift the body fat, improve body composition, and keep it off. We have
Mm.
no interest in making sure you have this fad diet and then go backwards. But there's also the other risk, which is that you are so not slow, but so sort of half-assed with everything that you do that you never actually get the result because you're not doing enough to hit the minimum threshold in order to move forward, right? And this is the person that's eating healthy but still the same weight 6 months later, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
I think breaking down the it's a marathon, it's
mm.
not a sprint, it's a marathon, is actually, yes, it is a sprint and then it's a walk, right? So you need to use the whole, an analogy we use now outside our world a lot is the getting the rocket off the ground, right? You use 90% of the fuel in that first tank in order to just get off the fuel, get up to a decent speed before you can then coast along at that particular speed. It is absolutely the same with the human body. I'm working with a couple really busy executives at the moment, all have really poor insulin control. So every time they have, a couple weeks of high carbohydrates, they've put on 5 kilos, right? And they're just like clockwork. Every time they do this business trip, they put the weight on. So what we've done here is said, like, cool, stop doing the marathon thing. Let's sprint, go hard for the next 6 weeks. Let's get this insulin numbers back down. Let's improve your insulin sensitivity as much as possible. And that might take 3 months, it might take six, but once we get you to that point, you go back on that trip and you'll see how much better you've got that sort of bounce back impact of when you do have carbohydrate, it doesn't just stick to your middle and stay there.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I do like that analogy. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but I think you do need that sort of critical effort required to just get the rocket off the ground.
Yeah, it's a real interesting dynamic, a kind of paradox in a way, and is it that we talk about long-term health, but
Yep.
then we're also kind of very much, and I think you and I have got stronger on this point over time, and it's just purely comes from seeing the people who do really
Yep.
well and people that struggle, and that is that when you start to make a change, if you go too slowly with the change, you feel like you're putting in all of the effort and getting none of the results, and it's incredibly demotivating. And so I'm always more of a fan of go in 100 or 110% for a short amount of time, get things moving, and then you can have that discussion about where the compromises can be and how this is sustainable. Another concept that we talk about is sustainability, right? You don't want to sustain what you've got right now. That means you need to change something now. And then when you're at the point of I'm happy with this, then we talk about sustainability because you're actually sustaining the thing you want. And I think the thing that really trips people up, while it was a well-meaning concept, is the whole 80-20 when it comes to food.
Yep.
And so people kind of break that down across the week and think, well, if I have a couple of meals out in a week or whatever, maybe it's 20% of my overall, but it might be significantly more than 20% of your calories. And that's the problem, is if
Yep.
you're eating well all week, but then you go out and you're having, 3,000 or 4,000 calories of vegetable oils and all sorts of crap 2 times in the weekend, you're fully undermining all the good work that you've done. So you feel like you've done everything and got nothing for it. And so my thoughts, exactly like you said, is let's do the work first, get that sprint out of the way. And in that, you learn so much about yourself. You learn what works. You also learn better what you need versus what you just actually want. You kind of start to understand that a little bit, and then you can be like, okay, now we've got this moving. What does this look like to keep it going?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's use your weight training as an example, Mandy. Obviously, from the outside, if you fast forward 5 years ago, you hadn't done a lot of it, you were looking at this from the outside of, yeah, I probably need to get into some weight training and lift some dumbbells up and down, right? Like that was kind of the concept of like count to 10, 3 sets of something that does the job, right? If we fast forward to now, you're nerding out enough to know that there's the strength curves we're looking at, there's the frequency of exercises, there's the different body part splits that we're breaking down in order to get the most out of workouts. Like there's
Mm.
all of that nuance. And I bring that up to say there's a mentor of mine that said this a long time ago that said, your best might not be enough, do what's required. And just listen to that for a second, because there's all sorts of people that get their arms up, their up in arms around this concept of, well, that doesn't feel healthy. I'm like, no, it's really, really healthy, because what you're doing there is getting rid of the fixed mindset that what you can currently do is the most you could ever do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, for example, if you go for a run today and you go 100% and you end up doing a particular distance in 30 minutes, right? And you called that 100%. Well, if you do that for 6 months, now 100% might get you there in 25 minutes, right?
Mm,
So what used to be 100% is now truly an 80-20, but
yes.
it's from that concept of you built the skill and got better, not that
Mm,
you've just gone half-assed and hoped it improved, right? So I think that's a really significant change, because we do talk about half-assed being a really great concept in an area where people try go perfect or nothing.
Yes.
right? And this is really looking at the maintenance aspect, but being able to address this whole by getting to a point of going 100 with your current capacity, that's the only way that you build your capacity, right? There are people that go to the gym every single day, they coast, they scroll, they don't pay attention, they come back every day for the year. They were consistent, but they just didn't train hard enough to change their body, right?
Mm.
So they could be, ironically, half as consistent, way more intense for the workouts, and probably get more results, right? So there is a real managing both. It's not one or the other. It is both. You've got to have the consistency and the intensity to get the result. And I think nutritionally, looking at the like, give me 100%, show me 100%, and I'll show you that it was actually only 80%, but great work for creating more capacity. Right. So
Yeah.
when we do start traveling and when we do start having those meals that are slightly off plan, if you actually looked at it from the outside, we're like, man, Mandy still actually nailed about 95% of her protein target all of those days. Right. And that would look strict, or that would look, hard to find, but it's just become second nature to you. I'm like, cool, I'm not having that, but I can have that. That's basically what I'm looking for. I feel better off it. Cool, on to the next meal. And I think there's just a real art and for me, a huge appreciation to like every sport under the sun now, because I've done so many of them. And every time I've done it, I've gone, wow, there was so much more to it than I thought, right? Like I'll use the motorbike racing as a concept. Like from the outside, you twist a throttle up and down, you hit a brake, you turn a corner, you kind of move around. Like the nuance of the positioning of your bike versus where your knee goes versus using the back brake and the front brake in order to have the bike at the right tilt so you don't lose traction on the rear as you go around the corner, right? So like the 100 different decisions that you're making going through a corner that takes 2 seconds. Has so much nuance on it. And just like any skill or activity that you're trying to get better at has that level of nuance. So my just like childlike curiosity to getting better at something, provided it's something I care about, is so much more in depth and just a constant reminder it's so much deeper than you think it is, because there's just that ability to realize that if I want to get good at something, and I've had this really smacked in the face for me lately with the whole car racing thing as well, which is if I want to get better at this, I just need to do 100 times more the work, not just like 2 times more, right?
Yeah.
Because just that ability to just get more and more reps is a nice reminder of like, oh, well, I'm actually doing this, this, and this at the moment. So the way to get better is actually to do less, not more, right? And we could talk about that in many ways, but where do we start there? This whole concept of like 100% is not your 100% always. It's your 100% capacity right now.
Yes.
It's exactly what's required to create that extra capacity, that extra skill set that long-term really serves you and allows you to coast and feel like you're coasting, but you're actually doing what used to be 100% for you.
Yeah, I like it. I like how that is in a way a really nice softening of a relatively hard rule, right?
Yeah.
You want to change up your health, right? We're going to do some changes and it's going to be hard, but it's going to get easier when you put the practice in over time, because what's your 100% now is not always going to be your 100%. And I think in a way as well, looking through that lens of changing up your food, it is disruptive. It's disruptive to your meal prepping habits. It's disruptive to your grocery shopping habits. It's disruptive to your psychology and your cravings and all of these things. So it's going to be disruptive. We can't go into it thinking that it won't be, because if we are, we'll be disappointed. But also with the grace to think it's a whole new skill set that we get to learn. And if it's something you want to learn, it's going to require some practice. And the practice looks like doing the thing repeatedly and just getting used to doing the thing. And eventually the thing will not be so hard anymore.
Yep. Cool. I'm glad we went down that route. Team, one thing I want to say before we continue here is I've had a bunch of thank you notes and general just compliments about the podcast lately. Obviously, I appreciate you all listening for as long as you have been. And I guess and we've gone so many different routes with this, but the ability to tackle more the mental components, the mental battles behind the scenes, that we're one of very few people that see this volume of people on a regular basis to really understand the human behavior happening to really create sustainable change. And it's not all sexy, and it's the frank conversations that need to be had that I'm quite happy to have with you. So appreciate you reaching out where you have to just say thank you for the podcast and enjoy the listening, regardless of whether you have or not. I'm glad that you're listening in still, and that hopefully you're continuing to get more out of this. The phrases, the breakdowns of just stories that we're trying to look at here is a big one, right? Of just, oh, I didn't realize that was a story I was still holding on to. I was justifying this after the fact, or I was just going along with society's norms of why people stay overweight. Whereas actually, I don't think that way, or that's not something I need to keep doing, or that wasn't self-sabotage. That was just me not paying attention. And the more we can really start to find that groove of we chose to feel this way. This isn't a like rule or a have to or I'm following a diet. It's just I feel better eating this way. And there's all sorts of judgment and past experiences there that go into that discussion. I'm not overlooking the challenges in that shift, but I am highlighting how important it is to make if you want to really keep that as an enjoyable long-term experience that you continue to choose, you continue to enjoy that you've made that decision, I guess, in many ways, rather than constantly fighting yourself and feeling like it should be a different way. I think it comes from like a permission or I think I should feel a different way when it won't.
Yeah. And I think hopefully what we provide here as well is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know to question what you don't know is a question, right? You don't
Yeah.
even know. We just accept things so easily. And a lot of these stories that, people tell about food, or we would even have told about food at times in our life, are just things that they're just in there. They're no one's fault. They're just there, and they're just this rote answer that we give. And sometimes we don't even know to question it. Things like, I don't want to cook 2 meals for me or my kids, or I need to have something that's easy and it needs to be, and it's a work lunch or something like that. Like all of these stories, they just come out. And so hopefully what we're offering here is just that perspective of it's okay to question that and check, is that actually true for you? Because maybe it isn't. And maybe it's something that is impacting the results you're getting, and it could be quite simply changed as well.
Yep, 100%. Just to give you, I don't know why, but I need to give you some examples here. The whole societal norms of ones that I've seen come up real recently, right? Like one was like, oh, can't talk to these things, talk about these things with your wife. And I'm like, really? I do regularly, right? Or, oh, it's Monday. Like nobody likes Mondays. I'm like, really? I really like just getting into these things I've been worried about a weekend, right? Like those sort of just societal norms that are there that if you're just like, oh, yeah, totally like that, it's so easy to just kind of fall into that rhythm. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of those that we all believe. And the ones that we don't stop to question are the ones that are really shooting us in the foot. So hopefully, if we've brought up a couple of those around food of just like, oh, it's, uh, that we need to have our champion's breakfast of oats for breakfast. Like, well, actually, if you're, over 40 and your blood sugar is not great and you want to shift some weight, like last thing I want you having for breakfast, right? So just wherever those sort of those ingrained habits come in, that's worth breaking down. But also, not every meal needs to be a Michelin experience. Whack some sauce on it, put it in the microwave, and eat the damn thing. Get your functional components of like my body requires this, so I'm going to hit these minimum markers, and I'm going to make sure it tastes easy, tastes good where possible, but I'm not going to make that the limitation to make me go get the Indian down the road or the fish and chips instead of actually eating what my body requires, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a 100%. I'll say it until I die. It's a self-respect thing more than a lack of knowledge. You know what healthy feels like. You just got to eat it more regularly and respect how much better your body feels when you get there.
Yeah, 100%. Hit the basic needs for your body first and then talk about how to make it nice.
Yep.